All right, well, it's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. um, and so, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the latest IRIS Early Career webinar. This is your host, Danielle Sumi, speaking from the Incorporated Research Institutions for Seismology headquarters in Washington, D.C. IRIS is a consortium of universities and an NSF-funded science facility operating programs that enable earth scientists to perform advanced research in geophysics, particularly in seismology. Today's webinar is part of a series highlighting professional development topics to lower the energy and knowledge barriers associated with careers in science. Those interested in additional resources aimed at early career investigators can check out our webpage at iris.edu/hq/ECI, which you should be able to see on your screen. In addition, webinars are recorded and archived on the IRIS YouTube channel, so you can just simply Google IRIS YouTube and you should be able to find us. Just to lay some ground rules, only the presenter, Heather Holton, and I will speak. If you have a comment or question as the webinar unfolds, please clearly and concisely type it into the box on the webinar control. And at the end of the webinar, I will read those questions out loud to Heather. At the end, I will read your name and question again to Heather. If similar questions have been asked, I may combine them or simply skip them. If the webinar crashes, which has actually happened once, I will simply reboot it, and so just click the link you received in an email when registering. At the end of this webinar, I will send out a short 5-minute survey via email. It only has about 7 questions. Your opinions and insight will help us to inform future webinars. One of the questions we'll ask if you are watching this remotely in big groups. So if it's just more than you out there, please let me know so we can have an accurate account of who was able to attend. Again, before I begin, I just wanted to remind everyone of the IRIS Early Career Investigator, or ECI, resources that IRIS offers. Many of our resources you can see are hosted online at iris.edu/hq/ECI. And a description of all the resources we offer was recently published in EOS, which is an AGU publication, which I now have up. You can find that under Education in EOS, and it's titled Helping Early Career Researchers Succeed. The article will also be in the print edition of EOS on October 1st, so please watch out for that. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to contact the co-authors, of which I am one of them. In addition, please stay tuned via email through IRIS bulk mail to hear more about events that we'll be holding at the Geological Society of America meeting in early November, as well as the American Geophysics Union, which AGU, at the fall meeting this year in December. So please stay tuned for that. Today's presenter is Heather Holton, who is an education and outreach specialist for workforce development at the American Geosciences Institute, or AGI. AGI is a nonprofit federation of 50 geoscience professional societies. AGI's workforce program tracks the supply and demand of geoscientists and is dedicated to supporting geoscience departments by providing pertinent information regarding the geoscience job market and practical career resources for undergraduate and graduate students to make a well-informed decisions about studying the geosciences and what careers best suit their skills and interests. As the education outreach specialist for workforce development, Heather is uniquely qualified to discuss geoscience careers, and especially those outside of academia. Without further ado, here's Heather to talk about thinking differently about geoscience careers. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I have been with AGI for over 4 years as a workforce development and their education and outreach specialist, and so my talk will address several key things with you today. First, I want to talk about how to start thinking about your career pathway and what tools you already have to build a career that's actually unique to you and to your strengths and to your interests. Secondly, I will provide a little bit of context about today's current outlook on the geoscience workforce, what are some of the trends we've seen, and what do we expect to see in the next 5 to 10 years or so. Third, I will talk about what skills are needed to find gainful employment and persist in your career. And this part of the discussion will include talking about transferable skills and technical geoscience competencies. And lastly, I will be discussing the importance of networking and some helpful tips on how to do it. And I'll also provide a list of resources at the end of my talk, which you may find helpful when considering your job search. So hopefully you'll find that helpful. So Danielle gave a wonderful explanation of who AGI is, and I'll just go over that briefly again. We are a federation of over 50 geoscientific professional societies, and so you've probably heard of a lot of them. They would include GSA, AGU, AAPG, SEG, and AIPG, for example. There are a lot of others. And because we have this federation, we actually represent over 250,000 geoscientists nationally and globally. And so that really positions us as an organization to serve the community as a whole and provide many different types of resources to everyone out there. And we have 5 different focus areas in the that we can support the geoscience community in different ways. I'm just going to give 3 examples. Our policy department, they inform policymakers on the Hill about important scientific issues going on in our community, and then they'll inform our membership societies about the relevant legislation on the Hill. And so they really serve to bridge and facilitate the discussion between those 2 parties. And actually, for the past 2 elections, our policy folks, in collaboration with our societies, they have developed what is called the Critical Needs document, and it's given to both of the presidential candidates prior to the elections. And the document outlines some of the most important geoscience-related issues that would be pertinent during their time in office. And so those are some of the resources and things that our policy group does. I'm in the workforce department, and like Danielle said, we track the supply and demand of geoscientists, and we do that by collecting and aggregating some of those data from industry as well as data from the government. And then what we do is we also develop and administer our own surveys to collect our own data about what is going on in the workforce with students, graduation rates, salaries, what are the types of jobs students are going into and things of that nature. And so from those data, what I do is I develop those useful career resources for academics, for students and recent graduates, and also for non-academic professionals, and really serve as that middle point, that bridging to connect academicians with employers throughout all of the industries. The last example I'll give you is with our K-12 education and outreach folks. And they're actually responsible for developing and promoting the Earth Science Week toolkits. So here's a little plug for you, is Earth Science Week this year is from October 11th through 17th, so you can get our toolkits by going on the AGI website, which is www.americangeosciences.org. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own career pathway, and hopefully that'll set the stage a little bit to start thinking about your own career pathway and where you would like to go. So I actually got my undergraduate degree from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and my major was astronomy and astrophysics, and I received a minor in mathematics. But during my junior and senior year in my undergraduate program, I realized that I didn't really want to go into pure research in astronomy and basically sit alone in the observatory counting photons. I am very much a people person, and so I found that type of work to be a little bit isolating, and so I wanted to find something that would really integrate my other interests and my other strengths and my skills. And so I started taking more geoscience courses, earth science courses, and in those courses they were actually doing geoscience education research, and in one of their studies they were investigating students' attitudes and their interest levels and learning outcomes within those intro courses. And so I volunteered to participate in that study, and from doing that, that experience really opened my eyes to a whole new kind of scientific research. It was basically education research or social science research. And I started a research assistantship as an undergrad with the Science Education Initiative at CU Boulder. And through that research, I was able to do a GSA poster when it was held in Denver that year about the differences between male and female attitudes and their interest levels within these intro courses. And so from there, because of that research, I went on to go to Purdue University, and I got my Master's of Science in their Earth and Atmospheric and Planetary Sciences department. And my thesis focused on why students chose the geoscience major and what types of careers did they want to pursue once they graduated, and that obviously fits in perfectly to the kinds of work that I do here at AGI. So that's been really, I've been really fortunate to find such a unique career path that really integrated a lot of my interests and a lot of my skills. So now I want you to start thinking a little bit about your own career pathway and where you might want to go or what options are really out there that are available to you. And so typically when I give this presentation to an audience in person, I will pose these 3 questions at separate times. And typically I want to emphasize what are some of the things that you already know about, and what are some of the geoscience or just science related interests that you have, and then look at what are some of your hobbies outside of the geosciences. And I want my audience to really start thinking about how these questions are not in fact totally separate from each other. They're actually very much integrated. And after that discussion, I probe my audience to think about all of the different types of skills that are actually needed to be successful in these endeavors, and whether they're science related or academically related, or if it's something completely random from one of their hobbies, their favorite hobbies, and what skills that you're actually learning, and how can those be applied to a career that you may want in the future. And so the key here is learning how to use and apply those skills to really build a career that's tailored to you and your interests and to your strengths. And those other life skills that you've learned outside of class, those are really relevant and transferable to your future career. And so that's kind of the point I make when I bring this slide up. I want to discuss with you this infographic, which is an image that my colleagues and I developed to help faculty, students, recent graduates, and other professionals or folks who are looking to go into the geosciences really think about the geoscience workforce differently. So I know that this graphic is a little bit hard to read, and there's a lot going on in it, so I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds to look through it, and then I'll go through and explain a little bit more about the slide. All right, I think that might be enough time, hopefully. So I want to describe to you exactly what you're seeing. If you focus your attention to the inner circles, the central circles, they represent the different sectors of the geoscience workforce. And so geoscientists are employed within all sectors of the geosciences. And so they can work at a nonprofit, like I do, or at IRIS, for example. Obviously, one can work within academia as educators, professors, and within that sector. Of course, you could work in the government, such as the USGS, at state geological surveys, NOAA, federal, state, local governments. One can work in industry within environmental consulting firms or oil and gas companies, exploration, mining companies, things of that nature. And then, of course, you have pure research type positions within the research sector there. And so if you go from these central circles, and radiating out from them are these gray wedges. And these gray wedges represent the fields of discipline. And so in other words, these are the other types of interests that you have that can be integrated with your geoscience knowledge and with your geoscience interests. And so these span into other disciplines, such as business, law, policy, education, or art. You know, these are just examples. And then if you actually look inside of those gray wedges, these are examples of occupational titles So these are actual occupations that geoscientists hold. So everything you see in here, these are positions that geoscientists have. And so I want to emphasize actually that we couldn't incorporate everything. So this image is not meant to be fully inclusive of every single job title that there is out there, because that would be very overwhelming. We couldn't really do that because things change so often. But it really just serves as an example on how to think about the geoscience job market differently, and how to maybe approach building a career that's unique to you by integrating transferable skills and by integrating your other interests. So I'm actually going to go through some examples right now, just so you have a little bit more of an idea of what some of these things could be. So if you draw your attention to the wedge that says medicine, as a geoscientist, if you go into the medical field, you could integrate the geosciences into your medical training and be a medical practitioner who deals with the relationship between geological factors and health problems in humans and animals and plants, for example. And health problems that they work with include exposure to toxic levels of mercury and arsenic, exposure to natural dusts and radioactivity, or investigating the health effects of dust and particulates in the air after volcanic eruptions. So if you are interested in the medical field or knowing a little bit more about medical geology, AGI has a membership society that deals specifically with that, and they're called the International Medical Geology Association. And you can look up more information on them at www.medicalgeology.org. And I will have a slide at the end of this presentation with a whole bunch of other resources, so that one will be included. As another example, if you want to draw your attention to the business wedge over there on the left-hand side, if you look in there, hopefully you'll be able to see it, there is an example in there that says financial advisor. And so as a geoscientist, if you have interest in the financial sector, you could work on Wall Street, for example, because we need geoscientists who can evaluate the technical veracity of investments that relate to the geoscience commodities, such as gold, for example. But we also need people who can communicate with the finance community so that they can properly assess the risk and the return on an investment. And so that is one, I guess, non-traditional type of career path that you can pursue if you have interest or experience in finance. Looking at the policy wedge now at the top, you can be a science or a policy advisor and work with senators or congresspeople to promote evidence-based decision-making. Or another example is you could be a legislative assistant and go to hearings and briefings about science issues and look at what are important to the congressional offices. So really it's all about communicating science and policy for the greatest societal benefit. And so if you want to learn more about what types of things we do as geoscience policy, you can look at the AGI website, and if you look at under programs, you can see our policy and critical issues folks, and they'll have a lot more information for you there. I have two more examples for you. Under the law wedge, you can be a forensic scientist, and someone who is a geoscientist working in forensics. One example is they can do soil sample analysis and work with detectives and officers to provide data regarding criminal offenses. So you can sample the soil of someone's shoes really to determine its origin and where he or she has been to help solve a case. Another example in the law section here is you could work in national defense. And interestingly, there was an article in GeoTimes, which is AGI's magazine, which is now called Earth magazine. And this article told the story of a field geologist who could identify an outcrop, which ended up providing really important information regarding the location of Osama bin Laden after the September 11th attacks. And so that's a really interesting article to read about, and I'll provide that information if you're interested in reading up on that at the end of this presentation. My last example for you is in the art wedge. and I wanted to discuss a little bit about being a science illustrator. And so one of my good colleagues here at AGI, her name is Kathleen Kantner, she's AGI's science illustrator for Earth Magazine. And so what she does is she creates scientifically accurate illustrations by using her earth science background and by working directly with researchers to help them visually communicate their findings to non-specialists. She does a lot of other things as well with her art expertise and her art skills. Her other work includes making earth science inspired pieces of jewelry. She creates jewelry, which is actually really cool. And she writes children's books, actually. And they bring a storytelling, kind of character-driven approach to nonfiction so that children can relate to scientists as people, which I think is really important. So those are just a few examples of the different types of, I guess, more non-traditional career paths that are available to those who have geoscience degrees. And there really are so many opportunities out there to geoscientists. So as I move on in my next portion of my presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about the workforce trends to give you a little bit of context and what's going on, and then talk to you about how do you actually obtain some of these opportunities. So this is the second topic, is looking at the workforce trends. And so this slide shows the number of geoscience degrees granted within the United States up to 2014, so up to last year. And this is an important slide or an important graph to read because knowing how many geoscience degree holders we are producing is actually a good metric to estimate the health of our discipline. So in simple terms, this is basically the supply of geoscientists. This is what we're producing. So in the past 5 years, we have seen that degree conferment actually increases for bachelor students, and it yields over about 4,000 degrees. And if you notice that dip in that green line at the top, that dip in 2014 may be a reporting artifact due to the fact that many of our undergraduate students are finishing with a December or with summer graduation dates, and so those data aren't actually going to be recorded until the next year, our 2015 data. So that's kind of where that dip's coming from. If you look at the yellow line, those are the master's degrees, and you can see that they continue an upward trend, and that might be due to the fact that we had strong market conditions at the time, but it also may be due to the fact that a lot of students who are pursuing their doctorate degrees are actually stopping at the master's level and exiting at the master's, and so that would, overall increase the number of master's degrees conferred. So hopefully we'll start to see some more emerging trends in the next year or two about what the current market conditions are like and what's going on, since we've been seeing a lot of challenges, I think, with the oil and gas industry and with the mining industry. So that last slide was all about what we've seen in the past. And so what I wanted to do now is look at what's going on today and what we think is going to happen within the next 5 or 10 years or so. And so as of right now, there are nearly 300,000 geoscience jobs that exist in today's market. And so those jobs would include my job, would include any of your professors' jobs, etc. This graph, hopefully you can see it now, this shows the age distribution of non-academic professionals who are members of in 4 of AGI societies. And so you can see that there is actually quite a large cohort of professionals who are part of the baby boomer generation and who will basically be reaching retirement age very soon if they haven't done so already. And then as another example, the second graph serves to show the age distribution of the U.S. federal government and the geoscientists within the federal government. And so you can see that we're seeing very similar trends, that a lot of these folks are within their mid to late 50s and early 60s. And so this is, again, representing a large cohort that is about to retire. And so if you look at the number of folks who are reaching retirement age or at retirement age, that roughly equates to 143,000 geoscientists who are expected to retire sometime by 2022. And on top of those retirements, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, they estimate that an additional 43,000 new jobs are going to be created by the same year. And so those are jobs that don't even exist right now. Like, they're brand new, and they will be created in the next 5 to 10 years. And so if we think back to our supply of geoscientists from that degrees granted graph, we expect to have approximately 16,000 new master's or PhD graduates by this time. And what's interesting is, you've probably heard this in the past, but in the geoscience discipline, we consider the master's degree to be the professional degree. And so typically, folks who have a master's degree and they intend on going into industry and outside of academic type careers, having that master's degree yields the most opportunities for career advancement within the profession. However, if we start to adopt the Canadian model and more regularly employ students who are coming out with their bachelor's degrees, that will actually boost our numbers by an additional 35,000 people, and that will give us a total of 51,000 new graduates within this time frame. Unfortunately, even though we're able to produce that many graduates with geoscience skills and degrees, we're still left with a net deficit of over 135,000 geoscientists by 2022. And so one of the things that we've been noticing through our discussions with academics and with our discussions with professionals, one of the big challenges we face as a community at large is that many of our geoscience degree programs are actually at capacity. Our departments don't have the space or the resources to actually take on more majors. And so this has become increasingly an important challenge, and we need more well-trained geoscientists, but we unfortunately just don't have the space or the resources to accommodate them. Now, moving on, I wanted to show you this graph because when we have such a high demand for geoscientists, often that is coupled with very competitive salaries. And that probably doesn't come as a surprise to most of you. So this graph shows the median annual salaries of mid to late career geoscientists, and it shows that those salaries often outweigh those of the broad occupational categories. And so if you look at this graph, each color represents a different occupational category. So if you look at the blue color is all of the management occupations, and that light blue bar is the broad occupational category, and then the dark blue bars are the geoscience related categories. So if you look at yellow, yellow is all about architecture and engineering. Green is the science and social science, so STEM effectively, and orange is education, training, and library sciences. So you can see more often than not, actually, that the geoscience-related positions have higher salaries than the general occupation itself. And if you look straight across this graph at that horizontal black line, that is the median annual salary of all U.S. occupations in 2013. And so we can clearly see that the geoscience careers often have higher salaries than many of the other general occupations. So now that we have thought a little bit about the different types of careers that geoscientists can have, and you have a little bit more context regarding the geoscience job market and the demand for geoscientists, I want to talk to you about how to actually get one of these positions. And really, it comes down to skills, circling kind of back to that infographic and thinking about transferable skills. So I want to discuss with you a little bit about geoscience competencies and how they're important to our profession. So geoscience competencies recently have become quite a hot topic in our community, but what does this mean, and really why are they important? So if you look at the Department of Labor's Competency Model Clearinghouse, they have a frequently asked questions page, and they define a competency as, and I'm quoting them here, a competency is the capability to use or apply a set of related knowledge, skills, and abilities required to successfully perform critical work functions or tasks in a defined work setting. And if we take an example from the geospatial community and the GIS folks, they developed their own competency model, and it's basically a graphical representation that depicts the different types of competencies that is required for employment within their geospatial industry. So unfortunately, right now, the geoscience community, we don't have a model similar to this within our discipline. But a couple of years ago, AGI and the Association of American Geographers, that's AAG, we received funding from the National Science Foundation to investigate competencies within geology and geography master's programs. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our findings. And so remember how I said that the master's degree is traditionally considered the professional degree for employment? So what we wanted to do was understand how master's programs prepare students to be workforce ready. And so what we did is we specifically sampled those programs which do not award doctoral degrees, and those programs which also do not intend on preparing students to enter into academia. So we were really only looking at the master's level. And what we did is we investigated the different sets of competencies, those which were non-technical, which are commonly referred to as soft skills. And we also looked at the technical competencies in both geology and in geography. So what I'm going to do is go through some of these non-technical skills, as well as the more important and less important technical skills, which is what we found through this research. I'll give you a second to look at this graph and really see a little bit what's going on. So according to our study, some of the non-technical skills that non-academic professionals indicated as important or very important included information management, which is here as the first topic, time management, adaptability, and self-awareness. And so if you notice the blue bars to the left of each of those red bars, they indicate how much preparation students have received in their master's degree programs regarding each of these skills. And so if you look at the graph, the bars that say faculty, those indicate the student preparation according to the faculty perspectives. So it's really faculty reporting on how prepared their students are in each of these skill sets. So I want you to notice how small the percentages of faculty and students are who report extensive preparation in these skills. And extensive preparation is like the lightest blue bar here. And I want you to look at that relative to the very important percentages that professionals indicate, which is in the dark red. So here we see that there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between what skills the students are learning versus what is actually important in the workplace. For the less important non-technical skills, according to the non-academic professionals, we see two items that are still considered important to the workplace, which would be relationship building and the computer and technology skills, which isn't terribly surprising. However, we noticed the three other skills that are outlined with the purple boxes here. And you see intercultural skills, teaching, and publishing. And so these three items weren't particularly important within our sample population. Most of our professionals did not go into teaching careers or careers in academia in general, and so the teaching and publishing are those skills found well more within the academic environment. So it kind of might be a little bit due to our sampling population. This next slide, I want to move on to discussing the technical skills that geoscience employers seek in new hires. Looking at this first skill set, faculty and students report that students are relatively unprepared for conducting geoscience or geologic investigations regarding human health, safety, regulations, and quality assurance or quality control. And this is a skill that is actually particularly salient for geoscientists in the environmental consulting profession. And so they employ a large percentage of geoscientists. And yet the students seem relatively unprepared to do these tasks, like they're just not covered in a lot of the curriculum within these master's programs. If you look at the next skill, it's all about collecting historical information to plan geologic investigations, and we actually observe similar trends here as we did in the first skill. However, faculty and students indicated that students are more prepared to interpret and analyze the geodata, the maps, the sections, and the reports, which is great because having that skill is obviously really important to professionals outside of academia as well. And so students are well equipped to prepare and analyze and interpret the logs, the cross-sections, and the maps. And so we see that nearly 80% of the professionals indicated that this is vital to their careers. But overall, we're observing an emerging trend that students work really well with concrete and well-bounded data sets. They can manipulate the data, they can work with it, analyze and interpret the data really, really well. Unfortunately, we're noticing that they might be missing some of the more applied skills, which focus on understanding the full context of the complex problems and with developing creative solutions when given a diverse tool set. And so that might be one of the things that we're starting to see from these data. Looking at the less important technical skills, students are prepared to plan and conduct investigations that involve said strat. And yet, according to our professional participants who are outside of academia, these skills aren't nearly as important to their careers compared to the amount of emphasis that there is taught within academia typically. Again, a lot of our non-academic professionals were not employed in the academic sector, and so I want to emphasize that. And so this trend also may be true for selecting and applying the appropriate stratigraphic and nomenclature and establishing correlations or identifying fossils for paleo investigations. And so these are often items frequently taught within our programs, and yet this is the first glimpse of how important these types of competencies are to non-academic professionals' careers. So again, I just want to emphasize that these are simply emerging trends to really start a community discussion about competencies on a larger scale. So I'd like to take this opportunity to segue a little bit into some explicit examples of what practicing geoscientists say about starting the job search and really what they find as important. This is Vicki McConnell. I don't know if any of you know her. She's amazing. She is now the Executive Director for the Geological Society of America, GSA. And when I originally did this project, she wanted to give some of her own advice to students who are starting their careers in the geosciences. And so she says in the highlighted white part, the one thing that everyone should take away from every job they've ever had is that you learn something in anything that you do. You should be developing some skill set that comes out of that, and you should build on that. So circling back to what I was talking about in that infographic, really it's all about transferable skills. Another example is a piece of advice that comes from Mike Lawless, and he is the VP of Draper Aden Associates, which is a mid-sized environmental and engineering consulting firm within the Virginia area. And so Mike says his advice is really all about networking, which is going to be our next topic for the webinar. And he says in the white text, a lot of opportunities don't get advertised. If your resume crosses a desk and someone's looking to fill a position, you can get a job without having to wait for something to be advertised. And that's the networking thing. Get your qualifications out to as many people as you can and talk to as many people as you can. We're going to talk about networking now, and how do you actually use your skills and your interests and those competencies that you've learned in your programs to actually find a job once you graduate. So what does networking really do? Meeting and talking with professional geoscientists outside of your normal circles can give you tips on where some of these unlisted positions are, just like how Mike was saying, and learn more about them. And really, networking is an exponential process. It's the whole idea of like 7 degrees of separation. Your career is out there, but it's about who you know and how you can connect with them and connect with the people that you don't even know yet. So most importantly, something that I've learned is it really takes time, a lot of time, to build professional relationships. Someone isn't really going to hand you a job after meeting you for the first time at a conference once a year ago. They're just not going to remember who you are. So networking should really start as early as possible in your career. And when you meet a professional at a meeting or at an event, you know, it's wise advice just to follow up afterwards, stay in touch, because it really can take years to build that rapport with an individual and for him or her to get to know you and get to know your work. And so the idea that I've learned behind following up and building these connections is to be, quote, like pleasantly persistent. And so there are different types of networking, and networking can happen in informal or informal situations. And really, it can happen at any time. So an informal networking can happen at a conference when you're out and about, and really can happen anywhere, like I was saying. And what's great is it's great to have a set of questions memorized for when this does happen. For more formal networking situations, I'm going to concentrate on one in particular, which is called the informational interview. I don't know if any of you have heard of that before, but I'm going to go through a little bit of what an informational interview is. So really, it's a networking strategy to meet someone new or catch up with like an old acquaintance and learn more about a field that you're interested in. And the information you collect from the interview could help you make yourself more marketable to that particular discipline or to that particular profession, and you just learn more information. And so your ultimate goal really is to get a job, but you can't exactly ask for one outright. And so how should you do it? The first step is to figure out who to network with. And if you don't really know who to speak with yet, if you don't have any real connections with a particular firm or company, just try Googling companies that you're most interested in, and try to identify the scientists on staff whose projects look like there's something that most aligns with your interests and your skills. And then honestly, like, try at all costs to avoid the HR representatives. And depending on the company, that can be really difficult, but a lot of times HR is there kind of to set up as a block for you, which gets really frustrating. But if you are able to identify who this person is, like the resident scientist, go and try to contact this person. Send an email with your credentials, your resume, etc., and be as specific as possible about your intention and what your schedule is like, and just ask if he or she has 15 minutes for a chat on the phone or to meet up and get coffee or something like that. The thing here that's really difficult is waiting for that response. If you don't hear back, follow up with a phone call. And I know that that sounds really intimidating, and it's really difficult to do because I've definitely been in that situation. But practice makes perfect, and actually they do end up making a difference. So honestly, it's a numbers game. So if this is something that you're not getting a response from the folks who you're hoping to get in touch with, just practice and repeat and try a different company. Again, it's a numbers game, so the more you do it, hopefully you'll have more success. So eventually, when you do have the opportunity to meet with folks, and you want to be able to have like a short description of you and your work, and so I want to talk about the benefits of having a prepared elevator speech. So basically what an elevator speech is a 30-second abstract of who you are, it's what you do, and why you do it. And so it should take about the same amount of time to say out loud as it would to take to ride in an elevator with like your favorite company's CEO, for example. And the key here is that you really want to keep what you say relevant and relate it back to the person that you're talking with, of course. So after you're finished, ask the person a question about their work or what they do or something that you'd like to know about their company. And so it's really great to have a prepared elevator speech like in your back pocket, just in case one of those informal networking opportunities come up unexpectedly. So to wrap up, I want to leave you with some of the resources that I hope that you'll find helpful. To have access to the variety of resources regarding networking and advice from professionals, the infographic that I showed you, among a lot of other things, you can visit AGI's workforce website, which is listed right here. If you're interested in improving some of your geoscience competencies, we have something called the Geoscience Online Learning Initiative. And this is a joint effort between AGI and AIPG, and they have courses on there that you can take online to help improve some of your competencies. For the women out there who are pursuing their graduate degrees right now, or intend on entering a graduate program, we have what is called the Harriet Evelyn Wallace Scholarship, and it is open to all women pursuing graduate degrees in the geosciences. And so that application opportunity will be open starting in early October. And it's a really competitive and amazing scholarship. If you are awarded the scholarship, it's $5,000 for the first year, and you have the opportunity to renew your scholarship if you provide the necessary materials, and it's basically a recompete. And if you win the recompete, you can get an additional $5,000. So it's really an amazing opportunity and an amazing resource for women in the geosciences. And finally, if you're interested in seeing all of the competencies that were covered in my research, the Geoscience Career Master's Preparation Survey, those competencies graphs I was showing you, you can download the PDF of the report for free, or you can purchase it online as a hard copy. And lastly, I've spoken a lot about some of the other resources during the webinar, and I wanted to give you the direct links to these items. And so if you're interested in the medical profession, here's the link to the International Medical Geology Association. If you have interests that follow more of like the policy pathway, you can check out AGI's Geoscience Policy Program right here. And actually, for the forensics, in my travels earlier this year, I met with a geoscientist. Her name was Heather Hanna, I believe, and she had a GSA poster that provided evidence towards a murder case that was solved using her data as a geoscientist. And her research is fascinating for those interested in forensic geoscience, and so this link will take you to her abstract for that poster. And then looking at the GeoTimes article that describes the story of the geologist whose research area was in Afghanistan, and he was the one who was part of the team to help find Osama bin Laden. That's where you can find that article. And then if you are interested in more art and geoscience, art, science, illustration, things of that nature, this is Kathleen Kantner. You can subscribe to Earth Magazine. We have print and online editions, so you can go to earthmagazine.org here. Or if you're interested in learning a little bit more about her work and her pieces of jewelry and her books, you can go to her direct website, which is right there, kkantner.com. If you want to learn about how to become a licensed geoscientist in your state and you don't know where to find information for doing that to become a PG, you can take the ASBOG Fundamentals of Geology exam, and so you can check out their information here for more information. And we work with ASBOG quite often, and they were responsible. They actually let us use some of their information to come up with the competencies for that research that I was talking to you about. And lastly, if you really want to learn more about competencies, there is an amazing website from the Department of Labor, and it's called Career One Stop. And you can look at careeronestop.org and look at that competency model, and you can check out the geospatial competency model that I cited earlier. So other than that, I think I'm ready to take questions and discussions. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Heather. We have quite a few questions already. Just a quick question on the bar graphs that you showed. Is like the abbreviation IMP, does that mean professor's impressions? Is that?
Oh, yeah, sorry. That's the professional's importance.
Oh,
so it's how important each of those competencies were. So let me go back to these graphs. There's a lot to scroll through here, sorry. Yeah, so if you look at the faculty here, that's about faculty's perspectives on how prepared their students are. So there's students that they're teaching or advising. And then students is what their perspectives are, like how prepared they feel. And then the professional prep, that's how prepared the professionals were from their master's programs. And then the professional importance, that's how important each of those competencies are to their current positions as non-academic professionals.
Okay. Great. Okay. And then back to the career wheel. What
Uh-huh.
have you done a study of what the demand for geoscientists in each of those wedges has been?
No, we haven't done anything like that specifically. That's actually quite a good idea. I think something like that would be a little difficult because, with the geosciences basically has quite a cyclic nature, especially with oil and gas and commodities and things of that nature. So I'm not sure how we would be able to get the information for each of those wedges and be able to keep it updated accurately. But that is definitely something I can look into. That would be actually really helpful to be able to do that.
Right. And you briefly mentioned about the oil industry, and we
Hmm.
actually have a couple of questions about that specifically because of the current oil price and the impact on the job market. Um,
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make mention too that we have a webinar that's on our IRIS YouTube website that was given by Fred Schroeder, formerly of Noble Energy, specifically about this. So if people want to
Hmm.
check that out, it was about careers in the oil and gas industry and talking about his career and also his outlook on how the oil and gas industry is going to look for the future. Um, but we specifically had a few questions about, given that the current price of oil and fewer opportunities in the oil and gas industry, you know, obviously it sounds like
Hmm.
your projection of your numbers change, but also,
Yeah.
um, like from what people are hearing, I mean, it's pretty nerve-wracking to hear about the industry and that specifically that people are staying longer in their jobs and not really retiring at the rate
Yeah.
that that was, projected. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know if you have any comments about oil.
Yeah, yeah. There are kind of two things in that. First, with the retirements. Yeah, this is a question that I've gotten for the past several years. And sure, people are definitely staying a little bit longer in their positions now, even as they age. Um, but honestly, like that can really only hold out for so long. And anecdotally, I've seen so many of my great colleagues and folks that I've worked with over the years, and they're all starting to retire within the past year. Like it's going to happen, it is happening, and really it is going to change kind of the dynamics of our workforce. But one of the challenges is we don't actually have too many folks in their mid-career positions, so those who are basically in their 40s, late 30s to 40s. We don't have many people in the geosciences to fill those positions. And so what we're looking at is we're going to have to backfill that with folks from other disciplines, such as engineers, physicists, and those who don't really have a lot of exposure to earth science concepts and have like a foundational education on geoscience in itself. And so it's going to kind of change the nature of how things work, but things are moving in that direction. The second thing is with the oil and gas prices that you mentioned. We've been seeing a lot of layoffs this year in particular. And in general, we've always known that the geoscience profession and a lot of these types of disciplines in oil and gas and mining, they're very cyclical. And so we often do see trends of huge hiring times and then bust times where there are a lot of layoffs. And so one of the things that I try to tell people to kind of give them hope is if you're in a situation like that, you need to figure out how else are you marketable to your company. If you are someone who has a very specific skill set that can only be applied in one or two ways, then it's more likely that you're going to find trouble because they won't be able to um, keep you if they have to do like mass layoffs. But if you have a really diverse skill set and you have managing experience, or if you have programming experience, anything like that, financial experience or things of economics and business, things of that nature, as long as you're not like a one-stop shop for like one specific skill set, hopefully you'll have a little bit more I guess, endurance to hang on in and not get laid off. If that does that make sense?
It does to
It's
me.
all about kind of diversifying. Yeah, it's all about diversifying your skill set and making yourself marketable in a lot of different ways. So that way you have resilience. That's basically what I'm getting at.
Great. Um, I have a question about CV versus resume. Um, which,
Okay.
which do you think is better, or is it situational? If it's that we should just always be producing a resume, when would that,
Mm-hmm.
when would that be the case that we should use a CV versus a resume?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's definitely situational. If you are looking into more academic type positions, staying in the academy, I think typically a CV would be well received. Um, but if you're really looking into more industry-related professions outside of academia, they really do want to see a resume. And, I've had experience with that. I've talked with a lot of non-academic professionals who say a resume is the way to go. And with resume advice, it's totally appropriate to have a two-sided resume. So if you're trying to fit everything and cram everything on one page, that's totally unnecessary, and a lot of times it's hard to read and it gets really cluttered. So it's totally acceptable to have a two-page resume these days, especially if you have a lot of pertinent experience. And what you want to do is really outline your skills. What skills do you have that you can bring to the table that are transferable and that are really applicable to the job? So really focusing on kind of those action words and those skills and those competencies that you've acquired and kind of demonstrate in your resume, like, I don't know, like how they apply to the job posting. I think that that's most helpful. And also, when you're sending out your resume, it's totally okay to provide upfront your references. So that way the employers don't have to come back to you and ask for something else. If you give them all the information they need up front, it actually makes the hiring managers' jobs easier. So that's another little piece of advice that I've learned over the years.
Great. We also had some specific questions about recommendations for job opportunities in geohazard analysis, as well as congressional staffers, like trying to work in the geoscience and policy. Does
Okay.
AGI keep, like a list of resources that people could be looking for, or what have you found is the best way to get informed about different types of opportunities within the geosciences?
Okay. Like within policy specifically?
Yeah, so I had two different questions. One was for geohazard analysis, and one was for basically being a congressional staffer, being in geoscience policy.
Okay. So they're both a little bit different, although I think they're actually quite related. Geoscience policy, there is a lot of information out there. You can go to AGI's website to our policy and our critical issues folks and contact them if you have specific questions. Abigail Steedler is amazing, and she can give you a lot of information about the different types of career opportunities and things that, if you have various interests in what to do and, how to pursue a career in geoscience policy, you can talk with her. But you can also look at AAAS. They have their policy fellows, and AGU also does as well. And so if you look at AGI's website, let's see if I can pull it up. AGI's website, we have membership societies that have all of our, right here, it has a list of all of our membership organizations, and so you can look through our membership organizations and see what types of things that they're doing in the policy realm. AAPG also has policy people, and they actually are housed within AGI's building. For geohazards, a lot of that is at the state level, statewide and federal level, and so you can look into more government type positions, whether it's with NOAA, USGS, the state surveys do a lot of things with hazard mitigation, and it depends on what type of hazards you're talking about too. So if you're in California, anything to do with earthquakes, drought, landslides, anything like that, they do a lot of work. Dogami, which is the Oregon State Survey, I believe they do a lot of stuff with hazards as well. So there is a lot of information out there. I guess to answer your question, I don't know if there really is any one particular website or clearinghouse that has a list of all of these different things, which is one of the challenges we face as a community when we're all looking for jobs. So I wish I could had a better answer to that.
Right. I think, given that it's 3 p.m. Eastern, I think it's time to wrap up. So sorry, there's a few more questions. Some of them are pretty specific. So would it be
Okay.
okay if those people email you, Heather? Would that be fine?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to suggest that. I know that we ran out of time. If you do have a specific question for me and you're just looking for alternative pathways to try to fit your skills, your interests, stuff like that, please feel free to email me a short description of what you do and a specific question or two about like where to look, and hopefully I'll be able to point you in the right direction.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it, Heather. Thank you so much for giving this webinar.
Yeah, of course, no problem.
All right, so this concludes the webinar, and take care, everybody. Bye, Heather.
Bye.